I broke up with my girlfriend because of the Barbie movie. A few days ago, I watched Barbie with my girlfriend. And in Barbie and Ken's seemingly trivial, fantastical world, I found a life-altering realization that compelled me to end a relationship that had spanned 2 years of my life. It wasn't an easy decision to make. She was my rock. Those first few months leading up to us being together was like a delicate dance as she was still healing from a past relationship. She was so unsure about being with me, probably for fear of repeating past mistakes. But she took the chance, and we grew together slowly. She even stopped talking to her ex after a year or so since they had been good friends, regardless of the relationship they had. But circumstances brought them back in contact when his mother was hospitalized. She was too afraid to tell me, scared it might upset me. And while I know there was no infidelity involved, the lack of communication hurt me. She immediately stopped speaking to him from that moment over a year ago and hasn't spoken to him since. As if that wasn't enough, 2 months after that incident her parents were actively pushing her into talks of marriage with a guy they favored. We had an understanding that she would tell me everything and keep her interactions with this guy to a bare minimum and keep it as dry as possible. But when I accidentally saw a 2-month-long snap streak with him on her phone, the old wounds were reopened. She thought she had already told me, but we both soon realized that she had completely forgotten about it. I know snap streaks seem like such a trivial issue, but in the grand scheme of things, it was pretty massive, considering the trials and tribulations we've both been through. I was left in a strange place, feeling as if I was constantly in the shadows of other men in her life, waiting for some level of openness that never really came. But through all of this, she remained my rock, my support. She was there for me during the grueling days of university, the job search, and everything else life threw at me. She was there for my family, always kind, always ready to help. Watching the Barbie movie was supposed to be an escape from reality, but it turned out to be the opposite. In Ken, I saw myself. He existed to serve Barbie. Without her, he felt empty and devoid of purpose. But throughout the movie, and after some unfortunate patriarchy, Barbie helps Ken discover his own worth and realizes he is not defined by Barbie, but rather, he is enough just being himself. And believe it or not, this realization shook me. I had been clinging to the comfort and support she provided, blind to the mounting issues. But I had to face the truth. I was enough. My worth wasn't tied to her, my happiness wasn't dependent on her validation. She is a wonderful person, truly, but we had issues that we couldn't resolve, issues that were hurting us both. And all I am Ryan Gosling jokes aside, I am like Ken, still searching for my purpose, my calling. But I know that I am enough. I'm not sure where I'll end up, but I have faith in the journey. She deserves the same chance to find her own way without the weight of my expectations or the shadows of her past. So, here I am, a guy who realized his worth after watching a Barbie movie. It's strange how life lessons can come from the most unexpected places. It's been a challenging period, but I'm grateful for the insight. I'm ready to face the world, as me, just me. I am enough. I hated growing up with gay parents. Right away, I want to make something clear, I'm not a homophobe. My sister is gay, many of my friends are gay. If anything, even though I'm straight, having gay parents made me more comfortable with people in the LGBTQ+ scene. It never really hit me that my family was different from most others until the 3rd grade, when the bullying started. Word spread around the class that I had 2 moms, and before I knew it I was being taunted for it on the playground. At this time, my relationship with my parents was still happy and loving, so I shrugged the remarks off. When puberty hit, though, I became increasingly aware of the hole in my life where I wanted a father. Granted, my relationship with my parents was already souring at this point for a variety of other factors. Still, I yearned for a male role model, someone to talk to about guy things. My parents had no male friends, and only ever seemed to talk about males disparagingly. I would hear that men were inherently more violent, selfish, and unhealthy, and I began to believe them. Growing up in the environment that I did, I emerged with more feminine tendencies, and a deficit of traditional masculine attitudes. It didn't help that I was homeschooled for the majority of middle school, leaving me without a basis for what most guys my age behaved or looked like. I didn't have any contact with male relatives either. My parents both cut off their families from my life. I returned to public schooling for high school, but found myself intimidated by most of my straight male peers. I eventually learned to talk like them and dress like them, but I never learned to be truly comfortable around them. To be fair, my parents were extremists, and I acknowledge that. They refused to allow my younger sister to attend sleepovers when her friends merely had fathers present, under the pretense that they might assault or even rope her. To this day, I'm still unclear where their anti-male sentiment emerged from, but they never seemed to acknowledge the effect that it might have on me, a male. At around the age of 12, I began to understand more about the implications of my conception. My mother carried me through artificial insemination from an anonymous sperm donor. Being without a named father has put me into something of a perpetual existential crisis. I feel as though I was not even conceived out of love. I was conceived because my parents could afford to buy the necessary ingredient, some random guy's semen. I will never know half of my biology, half of where I come from and why I exist. I feel robbed of an experience afforded to nearly everyone else in the world. The worst part is, I feel utterly alone in this state of being. Orphans and adoptees are entitled to want to know their biological parents, and they receive support for that desire. Children who have deceased or vacant fathers at least have their mother's memory to go off of, pictures, stories, a name, even. I will always have nothing, and never felt supported for wanting more. Whenever I would bring up these feelings to my parents, they would be dismissed as pointless and ungrateful. I was told I was simply lucky to be born. Over the years, I've tried to make peace with this fact. I've managed to connect with some of my half-siblings on my father's side online, spread across the United States. They don't have any clue who our biological father is either, but they all grew up with fathers in their homes. I don't think I'll ever be at peace knowing my biological dad might be out there somewhere, and my mom doesn't even know what his face looks like. I feel completely alone in this sadness. I spent my teenage years envious of my friends with fathers, wishing that I'd been born into their family instead. As conceited as I know this sounds, I never felt validated as a straight male growing up. My parents wanted a daughter instead, and they got one a few years after me. I felt guilty and wrong for being a boy because there was no one in my family like me, and I was told time and time again that men were the devil. Once I became aware of it, Father's Day was one of the worst days of the year. I'm not trying to say that gay people shouldn't be parents. I'm only saying that they should be conscious of the impact that it will inevitably have on their children, and that they should try to provide them with role models for their gender. However, I am against anonymous sperm banks. All of those anonymous donors are leaving their offspring to be with a question that will haunt them for the rest of their lives. My girlfriend found out I was taking one for the team when we first met. It's ruined my relationship. About 2 years ago I was at a party with a friend of mine who will call Joshua. Me and Josh were just vibing to the music and chilling when he suddenly spots two girls. The one he was interested in was this pretty blonde while the other was her heavier friend. That's not to say her friend was unattractive, but just a little noticeably bigger than what could be considered average weight. Anyway, Josh turned to me and urged me to be his wingman by taking one for the team and distracting her friend while he chatted with the blonde. After a little back and forth, I decided to just do it to be a good friend. So we made our way over and made our move, where I would go in first and start chatting with the friend while Josh began flirting with the girl he was interested in. Again, this friend I was talking to was by no means unattractive, just a bit heavier than what most guys, myself included at the time, would go for. I thought she was very sweet, even though I was just talking to her out of obligation. It didn't really matter anyway, cause ultimately the girl Josh was into already had a boyfriend apparently and had seemingly brushed him off, with him eventually patting me on the back to signify I didn't have to chat with her friend anymore. So I decided to politely end the conversation, however, not before she asked for my Instagram, which I decided to give her. I didn't really think much of it at the time, and I was certain I would never see her again. However, a couple days later I ran into the same girl in my school's campus store. I didn't really recognize her at first, but she seemed to know me immediately. We decided to chat for a bit, and I was reminded of her name, Megan, not her real name. Anyway, it was really just small talk until Megan suddenly seemed a little awkward. I asked her if everything was alright and she replied that nothing was wrong, but she wanted to know if I wanted to go out with her sometime. This actually came as a shock to me, as it was the first time a girl had ever made the first move and asked me out. So, even though she wasn't really my type at the time, I said yes. And that was probably the best decision of my life. Me and Megan really hit it off, and before long we were in a serious relationship. Any qualms I had about her weight were gone immediately after the first time we had sex, as I actually found her body to be really soft and comforting. I had never felt so relaxed cuddling with someone before I met her. We've been dating for 2 years now and I absolutely love her. She's my everything, and I have even been thinking of proposing as soon as we are both done with school. Everything was perfect, until last month. Last month, we hosted a small get-together just for a few friends who are also in relationships, like a couple's game night sort of thing. It was here where Josh, who has been my good friend for years now, was pretty drunk, and made a joke about how if he had never forced me to take one for the team back then I would have never found the love of my life. The joke didn't really register to me as anything negative, and I was also drunk, so I just laughed it off. Megan was cuddled up next to me on the couch though, and asked what Josh meant by that. I told her nothing, but Josh, being the drunk idiot that he was, elaborated and told her the story about how we met through my perspective at the time. Megan just said oh, and didn't really react, so I figured she just brushed it off. However, the rest of the night she seemed kind of distant and even a little sad. Finally, once everyone had left, she let it all out and started crying. She was essentially in shock because this whole time she thought I approached her because I was interested in her, and learning it because I was forced to seem to bring back old insecurity within her. It doesn't help that she's actually gained weight since back then, even though I don't really have any problem with that and I've told her that multiple times. I immediately gave her the full story about how I fell for her right after that, and I have loved and adored her ever since. She seemed reassured and we even cuddled the whole night after that. Since that night though, she's been acting differently. It's like she's lost her confidence around me. She only wears large, baggy clothing even though she used to never before. She refuses to change with me in the room and hardly eats in front of me. Before, I used to playfully tickle her stomach sometimes and she'd always smile and play along. Now she seems insecure when I so much as accidentally graze it. She also refuses to have sex without a shirt on. So far I sat her down multiple times and explained that her body is incredibly attractive to me and there's no one more beautiful in my eyes than her. But it's like she doesn't believe me. Lately I've been thinking about offering her to come to the gym with me, but I'm scared she may be more insecure at that suggestion. It has ruined our relationship in ways that hurt me. The little cute quirks about her that she used to do is something of the past. Here insecurity has swallowed her whole and she doesn't even act the same anymore. She doesn't act like the woman I love. How do I get her to believe that I love her no matter what she looks like? That I truly adore her in all aspects? I just want her to be confident in herself again. Those who have been cheated on, what makes your story better than the rest? I was able to humiliate her by live streaming the whole thing to her family. Let's start this story by saying this happened 12 years ago. I'm now happily married with 3 children and regret absolutely nothing. I was with my new ex for 3 years. I had noticed that she was being extremely controlling. I was expected to give every little detail of my day and tell her my schedule in advance, and if I deviated from that, she would be very upset. She chalked it up to just bad feelings she was having and shrugged it off as her paranoia for past relationships of infidelity. I had never once cheated or strayed, and I never gave her a reason to act like this. It felt unbecoming of my fiancé to act in such a way. Now this is where it gets juicy. After she had asked for my schedule to make plans, as mine tends to be more hectic than hers, I noticed she was texting someone. In my line of work, if I put in more than 40 hours, I have the ability to take time off at will as long as the work is completed at a later date. I was very good friends with her brother and still am. We laugh about this to this day, and he actively reminds her of it. I messaged him stating I wanted to do something special for her a little bit earlier than our anniversary to make sure it was a special surprise. They both worked in the same fabrication facility. He was a fabricator and she was a shipping manager. He was kind enough to let me know her schedule. That's where the discrepancy falls into place. Without my knowledge, she was foregoing overtime. She worked 12-hour shifts Monday through Friday, with the exception of Wednesday, when she would only work half a day. She had been taking Wednesdays off right around the time that she started getting extremely controlling. Lucky for me, I had stacked several days of leisure time up, so taking a Wednesday off for me was not an issue. A few days go by, and Wednesday's here. I put on my work gear and leave for work. I was expecting her to leave as our apartment complex had 2 exits on the same road I could see directly across from a shopping center, so I parked my car near the back and waited. After about an hour, I noticed a very specific red Mustang with a specific decal on the back window. It was her cousin. I had also done my due diligence to take an old laptop, which we kept on our desk in an office area with a full view of the living room, bedroom door and bathroom plus the kitchen. I had set it up for remote access and had it alert me when the webcam noticed movement. Giving her the benefit of the doubt, I thought he may be dropping something off or coming over to assist her with something, as her family sometimes does. Sure enough, a message came through, so I remote into my laptop. He walks through the door without skipping a beat. She unbuttons his shirt and begins kissing him. I created a URL link for the live stream, and as she was preoccupied, we had a family group text and a friend group text. They were both part of it, but at the current time, they were currently indisposed and didn't look at their phones. They didn't even wait. They could have gone to the bedroom, but no, they decided to get freaky deaky right there on the couch. I sent the link off to the friend group chat and the family group chat. Within minutes, I'm getting calls nonstop from friends and family alike. There was no turning back. She was getting blown up, but she was ignoring her phone. Not until the 4th or 5th call came through did they decide to take a break. For context, the state I live in allows recording of personal property regardless of occupancy. I was the only one on the lease. She wasn't allowed to be on the lease because of poor credit. The call she had picked up was from her cousin's mother who she was banging. She answers the phone on speaker, and I kid you not, the first words out of his mother's mouth were "Stop fucking my son." They both became rigid, and she began to stutter over her words, saying, "What are you talking about?" The mother then divulged that there was a live feed of them sent out by me to her family. She grabbed every pillow off the couch and covered herself up. The cousin staggered off, trying to put on his pants and shoes, just to trip himself up and bang his head off of my coffee table, leaving it with a divot. By this time, I had made my way to the front of the apartment complex. I was there to greet the adulterer as he came out of the front exit. He froze and began to cry, apologizing profusely. I'm not going to lie, what happened afterwards wasn't my best moment, and I nearly got into legal trouble if it weren't for the fact that he was trespassing on private property. Let's just say I had a cast for 6 weeks, and he wasn't in any family photos for months. I went up to the apartment, where she was now fully clothed and crying inconsolably. I asked her if it was snot or cum on her face. Then I told her not to answer because it didn't matter anyway. I gave her 1 hour to remove all her belongings, as again, everything in the apartment was mine except for clothes, some makeup, and a few kitchen utensils. Her mother would not let her move in, as she was just filled with embarrassment. Same for her brothers, and the cousin's mother kicked her son out. Rumor spread around our town very quickly, and for a lack of better words, she was untouchable.